There are no plans to increase the range of this aircraft. The intention is to surpass other aircraft. There are two companies ahead of this aircraft company, Airbus and Boeing. A brilliant idea was needed to surpass these companies. Irkut came up with a brilliant idea that would disrupt this plan. There is now a very important aircraft in the world. Russia is telling us this is not an aircraft. It is a space machine or a technological and political superiority from the future. The engineers who built this aircraft are telling us, we built this aircraft from lightweight and practical materials, and these are from Russia. At the same time, it was said that we have now reached the point where we can build our own engines. However, in a market where giants hold such strong dominance, can it truly succeed? Can Russia's aviation sector finally break through the decades-old duopoly? The reason they are doing this is that before the Soviet Union collapsed, Russians were #1 in aircraft, and now they want to be #1 again. Discover how the MC-21 subtly changes international aviation rules by watching the video now. Additionally, we must look beyond the numbers and examine the underlying philosophy to understand what truly makes the MC-21 unique. This aircraft aimed to do something different from other aircraft, like the A220 or 737. Russia prioritized balance. The latest aerodynamic features were combined with operational simplicity and modern efficiency alongside proven and tested structures. An engineer boldly stepped forward with an idea. Let's cover the wings with carbon-based lightweight materials, like space vehicles, he said. These wings, which are lighter, cheaper, and more flexible to produce than Western alternatives, are a technical marvel. Most importantly, they were made in Russia. Everyone wondered how it could be done. But it was done because the goal was to reduce dependence on other countries. However, the MC-21's goals are not limited to this. The planes are not as comfortable as they used to be, and everyone complains about it like a bus. But this company is ready to do everything in its power to fix it. In a market where space is highly valuable, passengers will enjoy a cabin that feels truly spacious thanks to its wider fuselage compared to the A320neo and 737 MAX. A true engineering marvel. Russia aims to win not only contracts but also loyalty by focusing on both passenger satisfaction and technical superiority. However, in the real world, even the best aircraft must prove themselves. Now the MC-21's competitive edge is more than just its flight capabilities. Can this aircraft now outperform others? Stay tuned. The next chapter is just beginning. The most important thing about this aircraft is not its comfort or exterior insulation, but how it represents its own country. This aircraft is Russia's most significant initiative in recent decades to disrupt the established order in international civil aviation. No one asked the government for help in building this aircraft, which sets it apart from others. Other aircraft always receive assistance, but this is a first. Russia was subject to sanctions from several countries due to the war, and it was purchasing engines and aircraft parts from those countries. But Russia used its ingenuity here. It used what it produced itself. Russian-made systems and domestically produced PD-14 engines replaced foreign components. This jet is heading in a different direction from other aircraft and is now poised to take control in the modern world. In this way, the MC-21 is not just an aircraft, but a statement. Russia has shown us that it can now stand on its own 2 feet. In other words, it is saying that it can do things more cheaply by using its own materials. The claim is that restrictions can still encourage innovation. And companies in the East are telling their customers that they have the ability to produce better aircraft than those in the West. However, there are some costs associated with this change: production scale limitations, delays, and a long road to international certification. There are many risks involved in the construction of this aircraft, but the Russian president is sending the message that we cannot allow this. Today, the MC-21 is not just a business tool. It is a show of strength to other countries, demonstrating independence in technology in other areas. However, in a world where airline decisions are based on economics, efficiency, and reliability, will this bold political and engineering risk succeed? Is the world ready to welcome a third participant in the international narrow-body aircraft market? Can the MC-21 transition from a regional aspiration to a global reality? The journey continues. Are you watching? The most critical phase is now beginning. It is not about design or mathematics. It is about runway performance. The world is watching Russia very closely because the aircraft is landing on the runway. These first users are serving as test subjects to see if the MC-21 can withstand the demands of regular airline operations. operations, making them more than just launch customers. Maintenance should be easy, and fuel efficiency is also crucial. But certification is equally important, not just for Russian airlines, but for the rest of the world as well. It may look impressive on paper, but if it performs poorly in reality, the aircraft won't sell. What matters most is how it performs in real-world conditions. Perception is the MC-21's biggest obstacle to date. Whether justified or not, Westerners do not trust the Russians, and this company needs to overcome that distrust. Old designs, lack of export support, and geopolitical burdens cast a long shadow. The MC-21 must not only be competitive, but also do everything in its power to erase this distrust from the minds of the entire world. Determination, proof, and time may be required. However, the current situation is not perfect either. Especially airlines in developing markets, other Western aircraft companies are now experiencing delays or disruptions in aircraft production. That is why it is thought that the Russians should be given a chance. If the MC-21 is a viable option, it could surpass everyone else and become something that makes a global impact. Therefore, the real question is, can this aircraft rise to the top among other famous aircraft, or will it be pushed aside? The MC-21's potential outside Russia is the only wild card that could completely change the game. Rosaviatia and UAC, despite the fact that the aircraft was undoubtedly produced to dominate the domestic market, are not hiding their global ambitions. Additionally, as the MC-21 grows, there are plans to introduce this aircraft into markets where no aircraft have been introduced before. Other companies may face delays until 2030, leaving room for growth until then, especially considering that Boeing and Airbus are struggling to meet their order backlogs extending into the 2030s. Consider this scenario. You can acquire this aircraft in the short term, but countries in the East may only be able to acquire it 5 years later from companies like Airbus. Some people may be willing to overlook the political implications if the price is reasonable and post-sales support is reliable. In fact, some already do. What about cargo? Like its Western competitors, the MC-21 is well positioned to facilitate future e-commerce cargo transformations thanks to its larger fuselage diameter compared to the A320 and 737 families. Although not yet approved, internal information suggests that a cargo aircraft version is inevitable. In fact, aviation is as much about opportunity as it is about safety. They say that with increasing demand, there will be an increase in aircraft sales. The only remaining question is whether this Russian jet, once it rolls off the assembly line and begins landing on more runways, will be able to change the rules of the global game. However, globalization will not be easy. One of the MC-21's main issues is not engineering, but perception. After the Soviet era, Russia couldn't produce many aircraft because it fell out of favor with the public. Western designs, support systems, and certification standards have become widespread for airlines in the West and even in emerging markets. What made matters even more challenging was that the MC-21 initially relied on numerous Western components, from avionics systems to engines. Post-war sanctions put Russia in a difficult position. The result? A dramatic shift toward full localization. Russia began using its own engines instead of American ones, or its own lightweight materials. This import substitution strategy may seem like a step backward to some, but it is also a symbol of Russia's determination to stand on its own 2 feet. And with this change comes a new question. Is making your own materials a show of strength? Because despite the isolationist goal of Western sanctions, they may have inadvertently led to a rethinking of the global distribution of aviation power. With China's launch of the C919 and India's focus on its own aviation goals, the foundations of a multipolar aviation world are being laid. Other companies will no longer be as important. The most important company will be this one. The MC-21 is more than just an aircraft in this new environment. It is a flag, it is a symbol, it is a challenge, and the world is beginning to take notice. However, will airlines embrace this change, or will they remain loyal to their established partnerships? Despite its engineering prowess, patriotic sentiment, and geopolitical symbolism, passenger trust has yet to be earned. And without that, it cannot become a major player. Being new in a field based on support, consistency, and reputation is both an advantage and a disadvantage. This jet meets all the requirements, but changing perceptions is also crucial. Therefore, as the MC-21 approaches full-scale production and global launch, one question stands out above all others. Can Russia's rising jet convince a skeptical world?